Good afternoon, everyone. This is Irene Roberto from Arizona Department of Health Services. I think most of you know me, but I'm the manager for the vector-borne and zoonotic disease team. And I'm very glad to be able to introduce our speakers. And for the ones of you that are still learning or are new to New World Screwworm, hopefully this training will give you a good overview from a few different experts and point of view on this emerging disease. So we are gonna leave the questions at the end for each talk, if there is 5 minutes. Our first talk is gonna look at reform activities from the USDA side, and we have Dr. Suzette dePersio, area veterinarian for USDA APHIS. After that, we're gonna pass to our state vet, Dr. Wolker, who is going to cover activities from the Arizona side that he has been involved with. And then we'll pass it over to our medical director for the Bureau of Infectious Disease here at ADHS, Dr. Terriquez, and he will focus more on the human side of the disease. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Dr. dePersio, if you want to start sharing your screen.
Yes. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you great.
Very good. I did get a message concerning my internet connection. So I really hope that I don't have any issues with it. But if I do, or you lose me for some reason, please move on to the next speaker. Hopefully we won't I have backup plans in case I have internet issues. But hi, my name is Suzette dePersio. I'm the area veterinarian in charge in Arizona. And I'm really happy to be presenting to everyone today. Really appreciate the opportunity. Really happy to do as much outreach as we can as this becomes an emerging issue and as screwworm is moving north through Mexico, which we'll get into. This presentation may be a repeat for some of you. There are some recorded offerings of this presentation. A variety of USDA personnel have given this presentation at various points in time. And so I find repetition helpful for learning. So hopefully you learned something new today. And if you hear it again, then hopefully that will solidify it in your mind. So I'm going to turn off my video if that's okay, just to save my bandwidth, and hopefully my internet will cooperate with me, but I will come back on for the questions portion so you can see me again. But thank you all very much for the opportunity, and I will get started here momentarily. So please let me know if my slides aren't advancing. Right now we're on the title screen, so I'm going to give you an update on New World Screwworm and how the USDA has been responding thus far. So this should be the outline page of our presentation today. I'll give an introduction and some background on what screwworm is, show some pictures which can be rather graphic of infestations of screwworm. So I do apologize if you haven't had lunch yet. If you do have a sensitive stomach or a little queasy, you might want to look away. Then we'll go over distribution and current outbreak, collecting and submitting New World Screwworm samples, and I'll go over our website and some of the outreach information that you can access online. So first off, what is New World Screwworm? So New World Screwworm, or NWS, is Cochleomya hominivorax fly, and that's a picture of it on the right there. Myiasis is an infestation and feeding by a larval fly or maggot on living tissue. So this is something that distinguishes the New World Screwworm from other flies and maggots. It only feeds on living tissues of warm-blooded animals. The current outbreak that we're facing is in Central America and Mexico. And we have been, as the USDA, we have been preparing quite a bit for a domestic response. I'll show some maps later, but the current northernmost detection is in Veracruz, Mexico. This is a slide showing some of the historic and potential economic impacts of New World Screwworm, with Texas as an example. And as you can see, there is a QR code. I have shared a read only a PDF file with Irene, Dr. Roberto, so she can share it later with anyone who wishes to have that information so that you can access some of the links and QR codes that are in this presentation. But this is just to illustrate the severe economic impact on the industry that New World Screwworm could have, up to 540 million annually and maybe $1.27 billion to eradicate New World Screwworm. These are projections, but we have had screwworm in the past, and we certainly don't want to have it here in the future. So we're doing everything we can to avoid an incursion at all costs, because it will cost the industry and severely impact our import-export markets. So you may or may not have seen this depiction before, but I do want to show you what the life cycle is like for a New World Screwworm fly. The cycle can be as fast as 21 days, so roughly 20 to 30 days. There are adult flies, they mate, and the female will seek out some living tissue to lay her eggs. And this can be as small as a tick bite or a bite from a vampire bat, up to as big as if you've dehorned or branded cattle and they have some sort of open wound in their flesh. And that's the perfect environment for the female fly. She's attracted to the live flesh, lays her eggs. And then there's 3 different larval stages that occur over about a week. After that, they'll fall off, be in the environment, in the ground, pupate, and then turn into a live fly, and the cycle will continue. Again, the main point to take here is that the female is attracted to blood and live flesh. So transmission, I think I just touched on this, but yes. So female flies deposit eggs around wounds, such as small as tick bites, mucous membranes around the nose, eyes, ears, anus, genitalia, or umbilicus, such as young animals that have just been born. And multiple infestations can occur in one wound, and that can be quite common. Once a New World Screwworm has been able to lay eggs in a wound, it can attract other species of flies. Now, this isn't contagious animal to animal, but it can travel with an animal, which has caused recent issues with our current outbreak, and I'll get into that in a moment. So you can see on the right there that there's little kind of shingled layers of eggs that the female deposits into the wound on an animal. So that's the white eggs there are circled in yellow. So I'm going to get into some of the pictures that can be a little queasy. To orient you, this is a picture of a dog with an infestation in its neck. So to the left side of the picture is where the dog's head and ears would be, and to the right would be going towards the body and the back end. So in the middle here, on top of the neck, is a severe infestation. And as you can imagine, this would be really painful and irritating to the dog, quite smelly. There would be discharge. The animal will be depressed off feed. If there's infestation in the ears, they'd be shaking their heads a lot. And if left untreated, can be fatal and can cause secondary infections for the animal. So the morbidity and mortality of New World Screwworm infestation can vary, whether the animal's owned or it's wildlife, if it's livestock, whether it gets treated or not. So all of these different conditions, whether there's a secondary infection associated with the infestation, animals can become quite ill and then potentially die. If caught early on, there can be treatment with antiparasitics, and that can be really helpful. But as I'll get into later, we'll talk more about FDA approved drugs, so to speak. So that'll be in a different slide. But it can be treated, and we can successfully save animals if caught early on. Up on the right-hand corner there, that's one severe picture of where the maggots have eaten into the brain cavity of the animal. So you can see it can go quite far. I think my warning slide came a little too late, apologies, but I gave you a verbal warning. So here's some more. Here's an example of screwworms swarming.
Because Suzette, sorry a sec. I'm seeing another. Someone else, I think, is trying to share the screen, but I can't figure out.
Oh, no
maybe
worries.
Marlene. Let me see. Okay, Marlene, are you on? I think you might have accidentally pressed the share screen. Okay, well, I can still see your slides.
Okay,
Okay, so let's continue.
Continue?
Yeah.
Okay, so right now you should be seeing an open wound on the neck of an animal, and there's a bunch of flies on it. Can you see that?
Yes, I think it's all fixed. Thanks.
Okay, great. Yeah, so here's some more of these graphic photos that I was warning you about. So here are the flies swarming an open wound, and this is the perfect environment for them to lay their eggs on. The next slide that I have is showing flies laying eggs in a wound. It has different various life cycle stages of the flies and their eggs. So I have big arrows here that show eggs, a female fly, and maggots and larvae. And they're thriving quite well on this wound, and it actually goes quite deep as well. Now, I know all of these photos are quite extreme, so you do want to keep in mind that, as I mentioned before, the wounds can be very small initially. And so in the first 1 to 3 days, it might be a little tick bite, and that's all that starts the fly to get attracted and start this process. So when inspecting animals, it does take a keen eye to really look them over, because you might not necessarily see something this severe. So I just want to bring that to your attention. So another photo of a maggot infestation, flies swarming around the wound and laying their eggs. And the picture that I pointed out before, a bigger view of this, goes very deep into the skull and brain cavity of this animal, which is very unfortunate. And although rare, birds can be infected. This is a bird somewhere in South America. And so living tissue and warm-blooded mammals is the usual that we're looking for, and that can include cats, dogs, rarely humans. I won't get too much into the human health side, because of course we have someone else presenting about that today that would know much more about the human health aspects of this than me. And then I've got one more, I think, of here is a pig with an infestation in its lower jaw. And I think I'm just going to gross you guys out one more time. Here is a cat that needed to be euthanized because of maggots infesting the ear canal. And then I've already touched on this, but here's a graph showing different conditions that can lead to an infestation. So the umbilicus of young animals, a cut or wound, a bite, a sting, anything that can open up the skin to exposure to the female fly, or I also mentioned mucous membranes like around the eyes or nose. So that's kind of a pictorial way for you to view it as well. So here's a map that shows the history of the screwworm when we had it in the United States and how we pushed it down to what is called the Darien Gap. We have a fly production facility in Panama in this area, and it is called COPEG, and it was founded in 1994. It is the Commission for the Eradication and Prevention of Screwworm. And this facility, which produces sterile mill flies, was established to maintain a barrier and keep the flies down at the Darien Gap. And once we've suppressed them back down south, try to keep them there. I believe this information is still up to date. I would recommend checking our public-facing website, the USDA New World Screwworm web page, because it does get updated regularly. But this is mappage of the detections. So you can see the green boxes where sterile flies have been distributed and released, and where our northernmost detection was in Veracruz. And then a listing of countries and dates and the cases that they've been accumulating. So, as I mentioned, COPEG, Commission for the Eradication and Prevention of Screwworm. This is a cooperative agreement between the USDA and Panama that was signed in 1994. This facility employs 570 Panamanian nationals. They have a production plant in Pacora, Panama. They maintain 29 outposts throughout Panama and 6 movement control posts. And the dispersal centers are based out of the Tucumán International Airport and in Palmerola, Honduras. This is currently the only new World Screwworm pupae sterilization facility in North America. So I'll get into some of the plans and what we've been doing to ramp up our preparation and defense against New World Screwworm. But currently, this is the site in Panama. You could see in the lower right-hand corner there, the production facility is the only one that's producing sterile flies to combat New World Screwworm. We have some distribution centers that are coming online, and I'll talk about that in a minute here. So our interventions for eradication of the New World Screwworm. The first is sterile insect technique. So I've mentioned these sterile male flies. The female flies only mate once in their life. So how we've combated this in the past and how we're continuing to currently is by releasing sterile flies. By releasing the sterile male flies, they mate with the females, and the females only mate once. It's not a successful mating, and therefore, over generations of flies, it'll start reducing their population. So what we want to do is expand our New World Screwworm production and dispersal capacity, as we only have current production in Panama and dispersal facilities have been limited until recently. Other interventions are robust regulatory control. So movement of people and animals is really crucial. So movement of animals helps move the flies. While they can't fly very far on their own, the maggots can drop off of animals. They can pupate in the environment. So if an animal is infested and moves somewhere else, that helps the fly spread. So going along with that, enhancing quarantine and having animal control and inspection checkpoints to make sure that unregulated animal movements are not helping the fly move further north through Mexico. And then, of course, field surveillance and stakeholder engagement is crucial. Getting the word out about animal care, husbandry, breeding practices, how to treat wounds and care for animals that are infested, strengthening our surveillance in the field, performing outreach and education, and expanding our lab capacity for New World Screwworm identification. Currently, the MVSL in Ames, Iowa is the laboratory that we send all of our surveillance samples to. And hopefully we'll get some non-laboratories on board to help as well, because we could certainly experience a issue with capacity should we have an outbreak in the United States. So we're looking into making sure that we have all of our ducks in a row as far as our lab capacity goes. Oh, and I wanted to mention on the slide, because I'm not sure if it's listed elsewhere, but some of the dispersal facilities that we're trying to get online. One is going to be opening up in Mexico, and then another dispersal center to be opening in Texas. And eventually, hopefully in the future, we'll also have a production facility in Texas. I don't have exact timelines as to when these would be open and running, but those are the plans to get more of these facilities operating as soon as possible. So I briefly went over the process of why sterile male screwworms are released and how they mate with the females. At the COPEG facility, they produce at maximum capacity right now, which is 100 million insects per week. And then dispersal flights are conducted each week. But as the flights get further and further north in Mexico, it becomes harder to maintain this and to keep flies alive for extended periods. So this is one reason why having dispersal sites further north helps the efforts of dispersing the sterile flies. And we really want to try to reestablish the biological barrier and push it south again. So here's this map again to give you the visual. And the flight polygons are those greenish teal blue boxes there that you see on the map. And then I mentioned the funding for a facility in Mexico to produce flies and disperse flies. And then we want to have our own domestic production facility in Texas in the future. So as this audience may or may not already know, we, effective July 9th, suspended live cattle, horse, and bison imports through our southern border ports. In Arizona, we have 2 southern border ports, Douglas and Nogales. And these ports were closed to trade due to continued and rapid northward spread of New World Screwworm in Mexico. Seneca is our counterpart in Mexico, and they reported the northernmost case in Mexico, Veracruz, New Mexico, on July 8th, 2025, so this year, which is about 160 miles north of where the sterofly dispersal grid is located, and about, if I'm remembering correctly, about 360 miles away from the Texas southern border of the United States. While livestock is not moving through our southern border ports, there are still import of companion animals from Mexico. This is allowed as long as dogs, for example, are eligible for the import with health certificate and inspected within 5 days of their travel. So they must be certified free of New World Screwworm or have been treated, quarantined, and then free of screwworm before they can come into the United States. We work alongside our partners at CDC and Southern Border Ports to help facilitate these movements. Now, I think the next 3 slides or so are going to go over collecting and submitting samples, but really the main take-home message here that I want to drive home is please contact myself or Dr. Wolker, who's the state animal health official or state veterinarian in Arizona. So that's really the main step in step 1 for collecting and submitting samples for suspected New World Screwworm. Please contact us. At the end of my presentation, I will put our emails in the chat box. So we have 2 main emails: disease reporting at azda.gov is for the state, and APHIS vs Arizona at USDA.gov is for our field team here in Arizona for the USDA. So I'll put those in the chat. It's really important to let myself or Dr. Wolker or both of us know if you have a suspected case. So this goes through how we submit the samples. It's great to get eggs, larvae, maggots, flies, pupae, whatever you can out of the wound at different levels of the wound. Place them in ethanol, not formalin. Make sure to protect yourself, wear appropriate PPE, or cover any wounds you might have. And if you can take photos, that's even better. You can send photos along. This is a little schematic of how we would package up the samples, but typically a member of our team or the state team at Arizona Department of Agriculture would be doing this, but potentially we could guide accredited veterinarians or others for doing this. At the very least, placing samples in ethanol for us. And then there's a 5-38 form that needs to be filled out. It's our parasite submission form, and this would go with samples FedEx to the NWS in Ames, Iowa. So there's QR code there that you can follow. I'm sure Dr. Roberto will send out some of the materials that I've shared with her to share with the group at large. And if you have any questions, please let us know, but we really don't want submissions to go out without myself and or Dr. Wolker knowing about it, please. Yes, so when in doubt, just contact us and we can guide from there. And then that's about shipping to MVSL. So I won't spend much time on this one. But there are priority levels for the shipments. And so again, myself or Dr. Wolker would be the ones identifying what priority level, AKA how fast it needs to get to the lab and how fast they need to process it. So I'm going to go a little bit with my remaining minutes here, into our public-facing website. I won't spend too much time on these next few slides just because you can go on the website and check them out. But I do want you to be aware that we do have a lot of materials that are online, some of which you can print out, and they're in Spanish and English, so you can share them. We've got outbreak info, mapping, sterile insect info sheets, more QR codes for you to all follow. So in your free time, or if you're doing some reading before bedtime, before you fall asleep, you can have some interesting reading on our website. Economic analyses, CDC fact sheets, US dog entry requirements. Here's one of the examples of our fact sheets. So I sent one out to Dr. Roberto that goes over, it looks like this, but it goes over the activities of surveillance with fly traps on our southern border. And then, as I mentioned, brochures, handouts, outreach materials, we've got it all on there. And then if you're looking for something that you can't find on the website and you have further questions that you're not finding the answers to, you can always reach out to me. So I'll like I said, I'll provide emails for everyone so you know how to get into contact. Here's an example of a brochure that's in English and Spanish and has a QR code to go along with it. And then alert fact sheets. So all of that's on our website. They've done a really great job with keeping it up to date and with plenty of materials for you to review and share as needed. So as of the 18th of June, our Secretary Rollins came out with the 5-pronged plan to stop the spread of New World Screwworm. So those 5 bullet points are listed there as to her plan to stop the spread and suppress it back south. Down below there, June 27th to July 11th, there were listening sessions. And I did provide links in an email that should be sent out to the group, or as you have interest, you can let us know that there's recordings for these sessions now. So they were very popular and they got filled up and you might not have been able to join them, but you can now view the recordings at your leisure at any time. And so here, I think I'll take a moment to give a couple of notes about our southern border port operations. So Texas, since kind of mid to late July, has been trapping, has been setting out traps. They have about 100 traps along their border, and they've been trapping flies to surveil for screwworm. And more recently, Arizona and New Mexico have come on board setting up traps near the southern border ports. So we have in Arizona 5 traps around our Douglas border port, and then New Mexico, excuse me, we have 7, and then New Mexico has 5 traps around one of their southern border ports. Since the ports are not open, this is mostly border port personnel from USDA that are setting up the traps, checking them twice a week, and submitting samples. And no detections have been made. We have no screwworm in the United States. We have no detections of them on our surveillance, and so it's going very well right now. And then developing policy, we have a green book and a playbook. Our green book is on our website and focuses on overall New World Screwworm strategy. And then our playbook is in development, and we're really trying to gain as much input and cooperation from state animal health officials and industry as possible. So that, in the next couple of months, I can't really say when they're going to have it fully done and uploaded, but you should be expecting a playbook hopefully sooner than later. And then finally, I mentioned those webinars that we now have recordings of. So I do hope that if you do want to have more information or check those out, please do. It may or may not overlap with the information that I provided you here today, but I hope that this presentation was helpful and informative. I'm very excited to take questions from anyone that has questions in the audience. And I did want to let you know, I mentioned the FDA and drug, thank you everyone, the off-label drug use for treatment of New World Screwworm. USDA and FDA are collaborating to try to find a way to get labeled for use drugs available to veterinarians. But in the meantime, I do have links that I can share where the FDA lists different drugs that veterinarians can use off-label to treat animals as needed. So with that, thank you very much, everyone. This is the New World Screwworm general email. And then, like I said, I'll provide my own in the chat. And with that, I am happy to take any questions. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. dePersio. Let's see if there's any questions. In the meantime, if I can ask Dr. Wolker to pull up his slides and try and share so that we can switch to the next presentations. Do we have any questions so far? Hearing none, then I think we can, oh wait, it just came through. Let's see. Okay, perfect. Let me flag, let me pin your,
Should I answer James's question?
yes, is there any topical preventive that could be applied to animals? So a preventive product.
There's nothing for label use specifically for screwworm, but it is for your companion animals or livestock good to keep them on regular parasite prevention. I'll find that link to the FDA off-label use drugs to send to you. So that can be used for treatment once an infestation has occurred, but I don't know offhand of any specific topical that would prevent it from occurring in the first place. But hopefully that list can help you. And then in the next month or two here, you know, there may be updates to it or changes once the USDA and FDA collaborate a little further on drug use and what can be used as on-label versus off-label. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. For people who joined late, we are recording these presentations, so everything will be shared afterwards, including links and additional materials. I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Wolker, who's going to talk about AZDA activities regarding the World Screwworm.
Thank you, Irene. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. And hopefully my slides will advance here. Yeah, so just kind of wanted to go over a few things from the state of Arizona side, particularly the Arizona Department of Agriculture here on New World Screwworm, which, as we all know, you know, is a formerly eradicated disease in North America, which is now you know, reemerged due to kind of failure of containment down in Latin America and the Darien Gap there, as Dr. dePersio had mentioned. So there's going to be a couple of slides here that are a little bit of overlap with Dr. dePersio's presentation, but hopefully we'll address some other kind of aspects of those as well. Oh, it's not advancing. Let me see here.
You can try to stop. Yeah, it's fine.
All right. New World Screwworm, Cochleomya hominivorax. As Dr. dePersio mentioned, you know, this fly is kind of unique in that it feeds on tissue of warm-blooded animals, but living tissue. So most of the maggots that we deal with, especially in the veterinary world, typically they feed on you know, dead or necrotic tissue, and this particular pest, those maggots feed on living tissue, and that you know, creates a significant problem because not only do these maggots feed on living tissue, but the animals invariably have a fair degree of morbidity and in many cases ultimately mortality because these maggots burrow aggressively into the flesh, and so basically most of these animals end up dying because of secondary bacterial infections due to, you know, pleuritis, peritonitis, etc. You saw some of the images of the key deer over in Florida in that previous presentation there, where the maggots had literally, you know, eaten their way through the skulls of the animals. So these little things are very aggressive, very nasty, and you know, it's unfortunate that you know, decades of efforts to eradicate this pest from North America, you know, ultimately kind of failed here. And that has brought with it, you know, several challenges that we'll get into. So this is a historical map. I believe this was from 1972. You can see over here, August 29th to September 4th. And they had the numbers on the map there kind of correspond to areas where they were doing surveillance and picked up positive cases. And so, and the dashed lines there were targets for grid release for the sterile fly drops. You can see the kind of the dashed and dotted line there, strategic river release. And then you can appreciate from the map of Arizona there that we had cases clear up into Yavapai County. And so historically we've dealt with screwworm. It's been here. It's not we have a climate and an environment that's conducive to support of this pest, unfortunately. And unlike some of the more northern states that might be spared for several months at a time, given cold weather, snow, freeze thaw cycles, etc. Pretty much most of southern Arizona would be a reasonable habitat for these flies. The more northern areas of the state around Payson, Flagstaff, Show Low and things that get colder weather, they might be spared for a period of time, but most of the rest of the year, much of the southern part of the state would be susceptible. This picture here is actually from, we have a sort of a cabinet of relics and kind of historical things related to the Department of Ag here. And we actually have some small little vials with screwworm maggots in it that were used as educational materials as well. But this picture was kind of interesting here. Here you can see some cattle crowded into the corner of a paddock, and these ranchers treating these animals back in 1953. So screwworm was eradicated from Arizona or from the U.S. in 1966 officially, but of course, sporadic outbreaks here and there. We were still seeing this well into the 70s, and depending on who you talk to, perhaps maybe even into the early 80s. So it's far enough away that none of us have had to deal with it, but not far enough away that it's been forgotten. And I think the take-home message from this slide here in this image is that those products that these ranchers are spraying on these cattle right now, those insecticides, they no longer exist. They're not available anymore in the United States. So a lot of the products we used back in the day, they're not available any longer for a variety of reasons. And that's presented a huge challenge, as Dr. dePersio had mentioned. So here's the map of the kind of the eradication process for screwworm. So again, I mean, this took decades of work and huge amount of money, time and effort, and just got to commend our forebearers for getting this done, and hopefully we'll get it done again here. But you can see eradicated in the U.S. in 1966. Mexico was largely complete around 1984, and then Central America took kind of 87 to 2001 there. And then, as Dr. dePersio had mentioned, the Copeg facility, I believe the original agreement was formalized between Panama and the United States in 1997, and it took a number of years actually for that facility to get built and fully operational. So I believe it was fully inaugurated in somewhere around 2004 or 2006, and that was down in Panama, just kind of north of the Darien Gap there. The important thing to realize about the Copeg facility is that its normal fly production is basically maxed out at 100 million, 110 million flies per week. And as you can appreciate from the map there, when you look at the country of Panama at its widest point, it's maybe 120 miles wide. So that Copeg facility was really intended to maintain that biological barrier and keep those flies in South America. It was not meant for eradication purposes. So it was meant for containment purposes, not eradication purposes. And, as you move north from Panama through Latin America there, and then up through, Guatemala and into, southern Mexico, you can appreciate that landmass, really starts to widen, and the area increases. In that blue box there, that kind of narrow point in southern Mexico, that's the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. And that was sort of the intended line of maintenance of this current outbreak. However, as we'll see in a little bit here, there have been cases north of that, and the limitation of the number of sterile flies available is going to become again kind of problematic and present some challenges. So this was as of September 2nd, 2025. So as you can see here, Mexico had a total case count of 5,920 cases of screwworm. To put that in perspective, the southern border was originally shut in November 2024, November 24th of 2024. And at that time, they got their first case of screwworm. USDA and Seneca, which is the federal side of the Department of Ag in Mexico there, worked together. The border was reopened end of January, beginning of February, somewhere around February 2nd or 3rd. And then it got closed down fairly shortly after that due to some challenges with dropping flies. It was briefly opened July 7th and then closed again July 9th. And in end of January, beginning of February there, we had one of our binational committee meetings, which is basically all the southern border states of the United States and Mexico and the beef industries of both countries. And at that point in time, there was a little bit over 1,100 cases in Mexico there. So you can appreciate between beginning of February and now, we've gone from 1,100 to nearly 6,000 cases. So, the trend is continuing to increase. It does not, appear to be remaining stable or decreasing. And so, it behooves all of us, given that this pest does not differentiate, between livestock or companion animals or even humans, that we all do what we can to prepare for a potential introduction here. You saw this slide on the previous presentation there, and I'm not going to really kind of go over too much there, other than the life cycle actually has a fair bit of range to it. It can be as little as 18 days with appropriate temperatures, or upwards of 90 days. So the female New World screwworm fly mates with a male only once in her lifetime. 3 to 4 days after mating, she lays an egg mass of around 200 eggs at the edge of an open wound or on the mucous membrane of a living host. And at every 3 to 4 day intervals, she lays another 200 egg mass. Her lifespan is about 10 days, so very, very short. 5 to 7 days after hatching, the larvae exit the wound, burrow into the ground where they pupate. If the larvae are unable to penetrate the soil, they can move to a shaded area to pupate. And pupal development is temperature dependent. So it can be as short as 7 days in warmer temperatures or as long as 60 days in cooler temperatures. And for elimination in the environment, you really need a soil temperature that is consistently below 8 degrees Celsius or 46 degrees Fahrenheit for a prolonged period of time in order for those pupae that are in the soil to be destroyed. So as you can appreciate, even in the winter in southern Arizona here, soil temperatures, probably, over 46 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you dig a couple inches down, so there's going to be some retained heat and stuff. And so it's really only the northern part of the state that's probably going to get spared because they do get those freezing temperatures. Just touch on this again. This is just a great slide from USDA here showing that the different life cycles, the egg masses laid at the periphery of a wound, the female flies, and then the maggots in the wound. And you saw this picture here of this dog with the extensive screwworm maggot infestation on its neck there. Larvae are visible in the wound by about day 3. They can be upwards of around 17 millimeters long. Often these wounds, you'll be able to smell the animal before you actually see it sometimes. because of the extensive injuries that these maggots are causing. And the important thing there is that these wounds can be incredibly small, but they're often cavitated underneath. And so what might look kind of fairly insignificant might prove to be a huge infestation in a particular animal. What I did want to kind of bring to everyone's attention from this slide here is that these screwworm maggots, they have a propensity to kind of orient themselves vertically in these wound beds like this. So that kind of sort of popcorn appearance, where you see the little kind of tracheal elements of the those little black dots of the screwworm there sticking out the back. That's kind of like, I won't say pathognomonic, but it's very it should be highly suspicious that you might be dealing with screwworm if you happen to see something like this in your travels or in your clinical practice. And so as Dr. dePersio mentioned, please do call us immediately if anything like this is seen, for sure, and we'll get some samples collected and run at the lab. This slide was also in the other presentation there, and just kind of what I wanted to talk about on this slide was, it appears bovines are very much overrepresented compared to other species. So screwworm really likes cattle. Dogs are also affected, as well as a variety of other species, but cattle is a huge driver for infestations in Panama, and I'm sure that would be the case here as well. The top 10 causes of myiasis in Panama, as Dr. dePersio mentioned, umbilical infestations were right up there, cuts or other wounds, ear tagging, dehorning, tick bites. The important thing from this slide is that, a lot of the, procedures that ranchers are, routinely performing in the husbandry of their animals, like branding, ear tagging, castration, all of those things, that can serve as basically a nidus for infestation. And the other thing I want to bring to everyone's attention here are vampire bats. So that's like number 3 on the list of reasons for myiasis in Panama. And when you look at the distribution of vampire bats, you can appreciate they're all over South America, all throughout Central America, and throughout a large portion of Mexico. And they're getting awfully close to the southern border of the United States. When you couple that with, climate change, warming, environments that are kind of more conducive to vampire bat distribution, that is a concern there that, we're going to have, basically this, large population of cattle, conducive climate, a vampire bat that can essentially serve as a vector for this infestation. And now you throw the fly into the mix, and you have a sort of a recipe for disaster here. So the new World Screwworm response plan, again, just kind of a general outline of response, but basically kind of going through the playbook, which is currently being fleshed out right now between USDA, state animal health officials, industry. There's kind of a few steps involved there. So basically designating a infested premises or infested zone, instituting quarantine and movement controls, treating or euthanizing affected animals, area surveillance, and critical to this are our partnerships with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, USDA Wildlife Services, Game and Fish, and of course Public Health, and sterile fly release in infested areas. The sterile fly technique has been incredibly effective in the eradication of this pest. However, in and of itself, it is not the lone solution here. You still need the surveillance activities. You still need the movement controls. You can drop all the flies in the world that you want, but if you don't have, the other 2 legs of the 3-legged stool, that stool is going to fall over. So sterile insect technique is important, but it is not a magic bullet, and I think that's important for everyone to realize. The other thing that, and I guess it kind of made sense, but I didn't really realize about sterile fly production is that when they're producing sterile flies, if we take the Panama Copeg facility, for instance, it's producing around 100 110 million flies per week. But you know what? When you're developing those maggots and breeding those flies, 50% of those are females, 50% of those are males. So the effective population of flies being dropped in a given area is really only 50 million sterile males, because it's the males, of course, that are breeding with the wild type females. So, important going forward in the future are going to be looking at techniques for sterile fly production, looking at potentially, strains of fly that produce more males, or techniques to selectively produce more male maggots to maximize the numbers of sterile males that can be dropped in a given area. As Dr. dePersio mentioned, there's surveillance efforts going on along the southern border here. So in Arizona here, we have 2 ports of entry. Surveillance right now is currently only going on at the Douglas port. There are 7 trapping sites, and those traps are being checked, I believe, twice weekly. So diagnostic testing, as Dr. dePersio mentioned, National Veterinary Services Laboratory in Ames, Iowa, is the primary reference lab and lab that's going to be receiving these specimens. In parallel, though, in Arizona here, if producers identify a infested animal, obviously they'll be calling us, USDA, to come collect samples, and the intent here will be to collect duplicate samples, or multiple samples rather, and submit some of those maggots to NWSL, and then some to our NALM lab, which is the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, which is a lab designated by USDA through the NALM network to conduct diagnostic testing on behalf of USDA for foreign animal diseases, to include things like New World Screwworm here. The important thing to know about the Arizona Veterinary Diagnostic Lab is that we do have one of only 5 NBAF, which is the National Bio and Agri Defense Facility. It's the new lab that's basically replacing the Plum Island Animal Disease Center, and NBAF is located in Kansas, but we do have one of the 5 designated regional NBAF embedded scientists at the AZVDL, which is Dr. Patrick Mays, and his PhD, as a matter of fact, was in entomology. So we foresee him being in the lab there, being incredible resource for kind of maximizing our capacity for testing here. Finally, at the state level, in the Department of Ag here, Pest Management Division, we have 2 entomologists ourselves, and again, we'll be exploring ways to maximize our resources here and partner with AZVDL to utilize all the entomology expertise that we have at our fingertips. In the image there, you can see a little collection kit that was put together by our amazing alert program. So that's the Arizona Livestock Incident Response Team through the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension Office. And I think I saw Dr. Betsy Green here on the call. I think she's hopefully still on here. But they've done an outstanding job putting these kits together, conducting education both through the alert program that is jointly managed through U of A Cooperative Extension, the Arizona Cattle Growers Association, and the Arizona Department of Agriculture to promote awareness of this screwworm pest as an impending risk. So these little kits, thank you, Dr. Green. I guess we're presenting to her class as well, so hopefully they're enjoying this. So hats off again to the U of A Cooperative Extension for getting these kits put together. The intent for these kits is to distribute them to 4-H groups, livestock markets through our livestock officers and inspectors who service those markets, doing animal check-in, who again are serving as a sort of first line of defense and noting any unusual wounds as they do the check-in of the animals going through the markets. And then finally to the ranchers themselves. And I also have to give credit here to the New Mexico Livestock Board and Dr. Samantha Hollick and her team there for doing some of the legwork here, getting the Amazon order list of components for these kits put together. So got to give a shout out to New Mexico there as well, and their work program. All right. So treatment. So as Dr. dePersio had mentioned, there's a lot of work going on right now. The Federal Drug Administration's Center for Veterinary Medicine is working closely with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, EPA, and other U.S. government departments, agencies, and state animal health officials to monitor the threat for New World Screwworm and prepare for its arrival. As Dr. dePersio mentioned, there are no currently approved drugs by the FDA for the treatment or prevention of New World Screwworm myiasis in animals. And again, this is the situation that we find ourselves in, is this disease was eradicated over 50 years ago from the United States. And a lot of the infrastructure that was involved in the initial eradication of this disease, not to mention the drugs and the pesticides that were formerly used, they just don't exist anymore. And they're not available. So Center for Veterinary Medicine is working with drug sponsors, i.e. industry, federal and state partners, and regulators to understand options for U.S. Veterinarians and to treat New World Screwworm effectively and safely. And to that end, recently here, kind of mid-August, Health and Human Services issued an emergency deck. Basically, that emergency declaration issued by the Secretary allows FDA to explore the use of emergency use authorizations for animal drugs for prevention or treatment of New World Screwworm myiasis. So that was kind of the first initial step here to get the ball rolling with the whole mechanistic process for drug or other kind of pesticide use approval. So yeah, that provides basically the mechanism for those drugs to be identified and then subsequently approved. The important thing that everyone has to realize here are drug residues, right? So veterinary drug or pesticide withdrawal periods are incredibly important from a meat and milk safety, basically a food safety standpoint. And we definitely need the data to support a rational and science-based withdrawal period that is going to be appropriate for whatever drug or pesticide we're dealing with, to ensure that there are no residues being maintained in that food product, whether it be meat or milk or otherwise. And this is obviously if you take a slaughterhouse like JBS, they're processing somewhere around 1,500 to 1,800 head of cattle per day. No one wants to inadvertently or unintentionally tank 1 million pounds of ground beef or something like that. That would just be a disaster. It'd be costly, and definitely interrupt the food supply. So for local wound treatment, most of the local wound treatments are permethrin-based fly sprays. And there's really only one product that actually has a label claim for screwworm, and that's Catron 4. Everything else would be considered off-label. And these permethrin-based sprays are basically the under the jurisdiction of EPA. So, when we're looking at treatments here, whether they be local or systemic, there's this interplay between EPA and FDA and USDA and, state animal health officials and, everything else. And so it does get a little bit muddy and a little bit complicated, who's responsible for what, who has jurisdiction over what, who can authorize what. So that's kind of the initiative right now, is to identify those products that need label claims or, would be eligible for label claims, identify what kind of withdrawal periods they may have, and then get those kind of officially authorized. For systemic treatments, and I kind of want to draw everyone's attention there for the disclaimer at the top there. The products listed in the table below have not been through FDA's rigorous drug evaluation process for the prevention or treatment of New World Screwworm myiasis, and Center for Veterinary Medicine is not endorsing or recommending their use for New World Screwworm myiasis. However, they say that these drugs veterinarians may find useful in making extra label use decisions. So what is extra label use? Well, extra label use is basically the ability for medical professionals, veterinarians, to prescribe a product, a drug that doesn't have a labeled use or a labeled indication for a particular issue, i.e. screwworm, but to use it based on a reasonable understanding of mechanism of action, and again those kind of withdrawal times, etc. So right now, really the only product we kind of have at our disposal is the 1% injectable ivermectin for cattle. Dormectin is something that's being explored, and that was kind of really the big push behind the emergency use authorization there. It is a much superior product to ivermectin for systemic administration. It has much longer period of kill and duration of action compared to ivermectin, and much less resistance. Ivermectin, as an ivermectin product, it's been on the market for decades. A lot of parasites have developed a lot of resistance to ivermectin, and so dormectin is going to be the primary target for approval going forward. So, as Dr. dePersio mentioned, we do not have any screwworm cases in the U.S. to date. I'm sure Dr. Shira will be mentioning, human cases and travel-associated cases, but on the animal side, we have not identified any screwworm infestations in the United States. So our efforts right now are focused on education and outreach. And again, the alert program, U of A Cooperative Extension, has put out some information there in conjunction with us to help educate 4-H groups, ranch producer groups, etc. USDA has some great resources there on their website, and I urge everybody to look at those and go through that information. Just to discuss a little, kind of background on kind of the cattle situation in Arizona here, particularly the beef situation, the feeder cattle that typically would be imported from Mexico to help, provide those animals for largely Texas feedlots and processing facilities. Normally, we would get around 350,000 head of Mexican feeder cattle imported annually through the Douglas and Nogales ports of entry. Those border ports, have been, currently closed, and will remain closed until such time as Secretary Vag deems it safe to reopen. Don't know what kind of timeline that may be. Current drought conditions in both Mexico and the United States are putting an incredible amount of pressure on producers. The ranchers down in Sonora, they're having a lot of trouble having adequate feed to feed their cattle, and all of a sudden, all these cattle that they would have normally exported to the United States for our consumption, now they're having to feed them down there, and they just don't have the feed. So it's causing huge problems. There's limited domestic inventory to cover the approximately 15% contribution of these Mexican feeder cattle to ensure optimal function of packing plants. So that's a huge concern for the packing industry here in the United States. And the net result of all of this is the cost of beef increases, potential packing plant shutdown, job loss, and impacted food supply. So, practical considerations for screwworm response in Arizona. Again, during the decades of eradication, our department, so Arizona Department of Ag, which was formerly the Livestock Sanitary Board, had upwards of 80 to 100 livestock officers and inspectors scattered across the state. Through decades of quote unquote lean management, by government, those numbers have dropped to somewhere around 20 combined officers and inspectors. So our staffing has drastically decreased. At the moment right now we're sitting at 2 veterinarians, so myself and 1 assistant state veterinarian. We have 2 2.5 certified veterinary technicians that help us out, but we are a small staff. Herd management has adapted to decades of disease freedom. So I mentioned, just the routine procedures that ranchers normally do, branding, ear tagging, castration, just doctoring wounds, that sort of thing. Ranchers have not had to deal with this pest for over 50 years. And, as such, you kind of get a little bit, complacent, some of your practices and whatnot. And ranchers might actually have to start thinking, do I have to adjust my breeding seasons? Do I have to adjust how long that bull is going to be exposed to those cows so that I can plan my calving time for a period in the winter when it's cooler and there's less likely to be pest pressure from this insect. Quality and availability of cowboy infrastructure. Again, we eradicated TB, brucellosis, and screwworm many years ago, and back in the day, they would have to ride the range, they would have to gather cattle fairly routinely. They would have to become, experts in roping cattle and containing cattle out on the range. Because again, you don't have a facility out there, so you're basically having to, ride a horse into a group of cattle and rope it and, restrain it and then treat it. And a lot of that technical animal handling, animal husbandry expertise, just isn't there any longer. Ranchers nowadays frequently only really see their cattle that are on range maybe 2-3 times a year, and kind of gather their calf crop once a year to send to market, and so things are going to have to revert back to kind of the old ways if we do get a screwworm infestation identified. And then finally, there are no domestic fly production facilities. Recently, USDA committed to standing up a dispersal and production facility at Moore Air Force Base, and definitely, have to give them kudos for that. I think the target production numbers for that facility are around 300 million flies. So we got 300 million there, got 100 million in Copeg, and then I believe the Mexican facility that they're renovating, which USDA provided, I believe, $21 million for, is targeted around 200 million. So somewhere between 500 and 600 million flies will be the target, and that's ballpark what was being released back in the 60s as well to eradicate the flies. The only kind of qualification for that is that our cattle inventory is far higher in 2025 than it was back in the 60s. So herds are larger, animal numbers are larger, and 500 to 600 million flies per week might not even be enough. So we're definitely going to have to kind of keep an eye on that. So questions that we have to keep in mind here: how do we facilitate commerce and trade responsibly while safeguarding our domestic industry? What kind of passive and active surveillance is going on in New Mexico? If we go back to that map of cases in Mexico, the furthest northern case was in kind of middle Veracruz state, which is around 370 miles south of southernmost point of Texas. But there wasn't really kind of anything else on the map, and it's kind of a big question mark on what kind of surveillance is going on in the wildlife population in Mexico. And we might, be surprised here one of these days that it's a lot further north than what we think, not to mention the routine movement of animals within the country of Mexico itself. And then, flow of information and collaboration between Seneca and USDA is going to be critically important. So that's all I have. And I kind of gone a little bit over time here, so I apologize for that.
No worries. Thank you so much, Dr. Wolker. Let me see. I think Jamie. Yeah. So I think she's asking about information to order any of the kits that you showed from the alert. Do you have any information who is can ask and apply and request the kits?
We're still kind of, warehousing the kits right now. So getting those put together. So right now it's just going to be kind of targeted distribution, and then once we kind of amass enough assembled kits, then we can start looking at taking orders. But right now we're still kind of in production and kind of targeted distribution. So I guess just stay tuned for now.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Wolker. Thank you. Now we're going to switch to the human side with Dr. Terriquez. If you want to try and share your screen. Okay.
Working on that right now as we speak. Okay, can you see my slides by any chance?
Yes, if you can enter.
There you go. Better? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Dr. Wolker and Dr. dePersio, for your excellent presentations. And thank you for all the crew that is still with us as we review some important information about screwworm. If you know me, you know that talking about nasty wounds, worms, and pus is my favorite. So this we will continue talking about. My main focus, though, for the next, 20, 25 minutes will be to talk, obviously, about the new World Screwworm in humans, a couple of different case reports, as well as diagnosis and some of the investigation steps. Please know that there will be some overlap with previous presentations, so I'm going to try to skip through some of those slides that probably have already been talked about. I want to keep this focus. I want to make sure that we just go over what I think is the most important information about screwworm. So as you guys know, and as Dr. dePersio and Dr. Wolker talked about, we know that screwworm has been historically a problem, mostly affecting some areas of South and Central America. We have, in general, historically, been able to control this infestation and also prevent many infections in humans. Per the Commission for Eradication and Prevention of Screwworm, that website basically reports that there has been probably around 161 cases. Is the human cases, I should say. Is this information accurate? I don't think that we know. I would probably say more than likely it's close to that number, but certainly possible that it could be higher than that. This infection has been, again, identified in multiple countries such as Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala. And by June 2024, the first fatality since 1990 in humans was actually reported. After this, there were at least another couple, 2 or 3, out of which at least 2 of those individuals that passed with an infection associated with the New World Screwworm had some degree of underlying medical condition or immune suppression. So that is something to highlight. I was going to do the whole viewer discretion advice for my pictures and all of that, but to be honest, like I have 2 teenage daughters, so nothing really scares me. And I think that these pictures you'll be able to take. It's totally fine. And if you don't, please close your eyes. So how does this infection present in humans? So obviously, as it has been mentioned before, this particular worm or this particular fly will look for an open wound or a mucosa, and it will lay eggs around that worm, that larva is going to penetrate, and it does not respect any type of anatomical borders. So if we're thinking about other worms that may infect or other larvae that may infect humans, we would be thinking mostly about maybe botflies. And botflies happen to be very superficial, located to subcutaneous tissue, subcutaneous nodules. Painful also, but not as painful and as deeply infecting tissue as the screwworm. So painful skin wounds and sores that will not heal. If you look at the wound, you might be able to see that larvae that might be visible over those wounds. You could also see some of those egg masses around the wounds and membranes. After 2 or 3 days, that larva, you're actually going to be able to see that larvae, not just the eggs, because that's when you start seeing the actual larvae infestation. These wounds can potentially be secondarily infected with bacterial pathogens. So by then, you can start seeing changes suggestive of cellulitis, foul smell, purulence, etc. from these wounds. Please remember, it has been mentioned before that this particular screwworm or this worm, the larvae, really burrows deep into the wounds. And as Dr. Wolker mentioned, they tend to penetrate kind of perpendicular to the tissue. So it will have a very specific characteristic in those wounds that is what makes it, in a way, and in my mind, extra disgusting, but interesting nevertheless. This particular larvae will feed from live, fresh tissue and not stay superficially like any other type of worm. Again, just to focus, and this picture has been shown at least 2 or 3 times before. I just added that little sticker of introduction. Hello, my name is Cochleomia, which is basically the New World Screwworm. We're going to go over some of the human cases that have been reported in literature and the most recent US case, first case that was reported in August this year. So first case reported in the literature, travel-associated case, 15-year-old girl who basically was traveling through Peru, came back after her 3-week trip, and then she was having some severe occipital headache. She didn't know what it was. Historically, she has history of Terriquez syndrome, which is basically a skin condition causing open wounds, rashes, predisposition to certain bacterial infections. It's a genetic disorder that can also cause some mental issues and nail bed abnormalities. Anyways, this person had that, and based on those wounds, she got exposed to the fly, and then got infected with screwworm. Basically, on examination, and I'll show you guys a picture. This examination showed some punch-out ulcerations in the scalp, and also some little larvae that were unnoted there, as there was some movement noted underneath those wounds. So obviously, the main approach for most of this worm infestations would be you just add some type of ointment, call it bacitracin, Vaseline, and then worm, they're basically going to aggress. They're going to come out and they're going to say hi. So that's kind of how it goes. These are some of the pictures of this particular patient, just looking at that occipital wound, small wound. Also, once those larvae were removed, it was noted that those basically those small worms were very small, 6 millimeters. And I have some pictures that will show the comparison between screwworm and botfly, which basically look extremely different. Nevertheless, impressive. And nevertheless, just by looking at it, you may get itchy. So that is one of the cases, travel-associated cases that has been reported in literature. Other case, 26-year-old traveler who presented with basically ear pain, as well as a bloody drainage from the ear after a vacation in Dominican Republic. Apparently, this guy was sleeping in the beach, and the fly probably just looked for the mucosa, lay eggs around it, and new fear has been unlocked for most of us. And this is how this guy got infested. So when this guy came back to the country with this travel-associated case, he was seen by an ENT doctor. So the ENT doctor kind of got concerned about the examination of that ear, took him to the operating room, did some drainage incision, and obviously what was the concern, what was seen was the larvae. Problem is that this larvae did penetrate deep enough to the point of hitting the bone, so down to the temporal bone, as well as penetrated the tympanic membrane. There was no middle ear infection, but obviously whenever you see that type of penetration of tissue, there's always concerns for other secondary bacterial processes. So this patient was definitely at risk at some point for a meningitis, or you name it. But in this particular case, larvae were removed, and upon visual diagnosis, it was determined that this person had infection with Cochleomia hominivorax, which is the screwworm that we're talking about. Another case that I think was interesting, because this case was not as aggressive as the others. It was this gentleman from Canada. He was in his 80s. Basically, he was traveling to Costa Rica, which seems a popular spot these days, and he had a fall. So he had a fall. He had some injury to his both his knees and shins, and the injuries were superficial. He cared for those wounds. Everything was looking fine. But then upon returning to Toronto, it was noted that he had some larvae coming out of that wound. So obviously these wounds were irrigated, cleaned out really well, and there was several larvae that were extracted from those wounds that were later identified to be screwworm. So this is how this wound looked. This is obviously looking at the shin. Surprisingly, there's not a lot of purulence or redness around that wound. Seems like just a very deep, almost looking like someone really digged into that wound, but there's no obvious purulence. And that is one of the classic findings, because this infection should not be causing acute infection. It's just the worm basically eating its way in, the larvae eating its way in to deeper tissues. So this will get us to the most recent case that was diagnosed in Maryland. So this individual traveled to El Salvador. When he was evaluated, obviously the provider was concerned based on current news as well as history, and took history about, like, went back 10 days or so, knew that this person was traveling around, stopping in airports here and there, seen by a couple of different healthcare providers. Screwworm was able to be identified as part of the diagnosis. Again, telediagnosis with CDC allowed for identification of this larvae, and multiple agencies were involved in the management of this case. Obviously, whenever we see a case like this, as it has been described before, it is a big deal. It's not like something that we can say, oh, it's just a worm, throw it away. No, it is a big deal. Big investigation needs to happen. Huge mile radius needs to be assessed for other areas of infection. Look at the environment, look at other, like, animals, making sure that that there's additional investigation in local kind of new world screw flies, looking for those, making sure that there is no additional cases in the future. So that is the usual concern. As other infections, not that this is necessarily an infection as it is, this is more of an infestation, but as any other medical conditions, I should say, there's really no blood test that will help us diagnose New World Screwworm infection. Diagnosis is going to be mostly by direct visualization. So this is why it's so important to know that there are resources through CDC for telediagnosis, and I'll briefly talk about how that goes. One of the most important features to remember whenever we're looking at this particular larvae and the worm, it is going to be very small. So 6 to 17 millimeters long, and it will have a very pointy head. You may think that if you think that this is shrimp, it's not shrimp, because this is not the tail. This is basically the head of the worm, and then you have the body. So head comes to a point, has two small tracheal trunks, which are very dark in coloration, as you can see here. And several bands are noticed, up to 12 bands with some pigmentation that is basically representative of small spikes that will allow this worm to just penetrate in a screw manner. So that is one of the characteristics of this particular larvae. So head, tail, bands with spines, and the dark tracheal trunks that I was talking about. So whenever you do medicine, whenever you're seeing patients, you're always looking for differential diagnosis. Like, I don't think that there's any doctor that could look at something and say, oh, this is what it is. I mean, there's some, but for the most part, we always think about differential diagnosis. So I think that when it comes to New World Screwworm infection or infestation, the main differential diagnosis would be botfly larvae infestation. So as you can see, botfly is going to be larger, it's going to be thicker, and when it comes to screwworm or screwy, as I like to call it, it's very, very small compared to a botfly. So botfly is going to be bigger, up to 42 millimeters. It will cause some subdermic infection, cysts. You can feel and see sometimes movement underneath the skin. It will be irritated. It will be painful, sometimes itchy for the patient. As you may imagine, this botfly infestation will not be fatal. You guys all have seen that TikTok video of that poor squirrel that had masses all over and they were removing worms. Well, that's what it is. And it looks exactly the same for humans. So make sure that you keep that in mind if you end up encountering a case that may look similar to this. Most of the times that bot fly infestation will affect people that can't really move much, anyone that might be bedridden or unable to clean themselves. Those individuals might be at higher risk for this type of infestation. This is how it looks like. Basically, you will see an area or a nodular area, sometimes with subcutaneous movement, tender to palpation, and you will see a breathing hole. Whenever you see that breathing hole, you add some Vaseline, vasopressin, or any other ointment, and that worm is going to look for a way of breathing. So you might be able to pull that worm out as you're seeing here. So something to keep in mind whenever we're looking at the differential diagnosis for this particular type of infestation. As mentioned before, CDC offers telediagnosis to assist with morphological identification of the larvae. If you're suspecting a case, don't go rogue and start calling CDC. By all means, please reach out to us, especially if you're suspecting a human case. If you're suspecting anything else other than human case, animals and such, I can promise you that Dr. Wolker would probably be the one person to help you better than me. So if we're seeing a human case, if you're able to, once we coordinate and approve testing, I guess the more number of larvae that you can identify and submit, the better. But if there's many, at least 10 will help us. If for whatever reason you see more than 10, try to look for different stages of development of that larvae so we can have a better look, making sure that we do everything under the sun to keep this infection or infestation contained. So get some alcohol, don't drink it, put it in the container. Get some alcohol, 70% ethanol. You can use also isopropanol or formalin to kind of submerge the worms in there. Make sure that the container is really, really tightly closed. And then that is probably what we're going to take for additional investigation. Once you collect your 10 worms, if you have, I don't know, 30, 40, more than that, the rest, you're going to follow the same process, throw in a Ziploc bag and make sure that everything is really, really contained before you dispose it to the trash. We want to make sure that these worms are not free living in the environment because that will perpetuate the possibility of more infections. Treatment in humans, that has been mentioned before, will be removal, sometimes debridement, management of the wounds. There has been some anecdotal reports of ivermectin being used in humans, but there's no real controlled double-blind studies to support this. So just keep that in mind. So wound care, removal of those wounds, and then follow up 24 to 48 hours after to make sure that there's no live larvae residual in the wound. Again, as mentioned before, multiple risk factors, especially for those that travel to areas where there are flies associated with a New World Screwworm present. People that frequently work with livestock, people that have open wounds, people that may have a medical condition causing a bleeding or open sores. These may include uncontrolled eczema, or those individuals that have a weakened immune system. So all of those individuals might be at higher risk for infection. So the next time that you come back from Costa Rica, make sure that you keep that in mind. If for whatever reason you happened to experience some or notice a wound that may have some larvae or egg masses around your wound, or in any of your ears, eyes, nose, mouth, any of the natural orifices, make sure that you let us know. If there's any patient that you may see with this destruction of healthy tissue concerning for New World Screwworm, if there is any report of sensation, movement under the skin, foul odor, bloody discharge, swelling or pain, also those are findings consistent and concerning for New World Screwworm if traveling to the right geographical area. So for those of you that are traveling, make sure that if you happen to fall or get a wound, keep that wound clean as much as possible, covered. Make sure that there's no flies touching your wound. There's not a lot of teaching that I need to give you with that because that's just kind of general knowledge. And if you enjoy that, then you have a problem. Wear loose-fitting long sleeve shirts and pants. Use insect repellent. Treat your clothing and gear with products containing permethrin 0.5%. Try to sleep as much as possible indoors or in rooms with screens. And if at all possible, avoid spending time around livestock or other infested animals. Reporting is important. You guys have this information. If there's any concern for human cases, make sure you contact your local health department or ADHS at NWS or New World Screwworm at AZDA.gov or to our vector-borne zoonotic disease branch. So for the investigation, for those of you that, for whatever reason, happen to encounter a case, make sure that you submit the appropriate information, create a case on MedSys for emergent and exotic diseases. Make sure that you obtain all that travel history at least 10 days before the symptom onset. Making sure that you remember that symptom onset is basically whenever the patient first noticed those symptoms that might be of concern. Trying to upload all medical records as much as possible and make sure that if there are obvious larvae coming out of a wound, make sure that you collect, contain, and dispose once we talk, the way that I explained a couple of slides ago. From our end, though, ADHS will contact CDC. We will arrange for telediagnosis. Report will be issued, and CDC may have additional questions or even request a physical specimen for further confirmation. We will be working with you just to make sure that you have the appropriate tools to care for your patient and to assist with communication with CDC just to make sure that everything and your patient is taken care of to keep us all safe. We have added some resources there. There will be an additional training session a couple of days from today, and just keep that in mind. I think that was it. Thank you, guys.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Terriquez. Apologies that you had to do it a bit quicker. Yeah, if you want to put back maybe the slide with the training, the CDC training that I think it's upcoming, 24 there. So if people want to look at the QR code, I think this is upcoming and it's for healthcare providers as well as I think nurses, and I think they also give a certificate. Do we have any questions for the Terriquez and the human side? While we wait, and I know that we are running out of time, but I wanted to also add that CDC is working on a case report form as well as a investigation guide. And so we'll be updating you all when that is finalized and shared. So seeing no questions, but if you think of any questions, please reach out to our group, and you have our contacts with your questions. We will be sharing the recordings online and by email as soon as we can post them. Let's start the recording.